Chris Paul, one of the greatest point guards of all time, a mid-range assassin, killer basketball IQ, and a fierce competitor. But when it's all said and done, well, we have talked about him enough. This is the rise, fall, and rise again of Christopher Emmanuel Paul. In the 2005 NBA Draft, the New Orleans Hornets had the 4th overall pick and selected future Hall of Famer Chris Paul out of Wake Forest. After averaging 16 points, 5 rebounds, and 8 assists to go along with 2 steals, Chris Paul was named the 2006 NBA Rookie of the Year, almost winning unanimously, with the only other rookie to receive a first-place vote being Utah Jazz point guard Deron Williams. Due to damages caused by Hurricane Katrina, the Hornets temporarily relocated to Oklahoma City for the 2005-2006 and the 2006-2007 seasons, in which CP3 led the team to 38 and 39 wins respectively. During his 3rd season, Chris Paul was selected to his first All-Star team, which kicked off 9 straight appearances. He helped the Hornets secure a franchise record 56 wins and even finished second in MVP voting with averages of 21 points, 11.5 assists, and almost 3 steals a game. Chris Paul was now able to experience playoff basketball for the first time, scoring 35 points in his debut and eliminated the Dallas Mavericks in the first round in 5 games before losing to the Tim Duncan-led San Antonio Spurs in the following round. It was around this time that CP3 was recognized as arguably being the best point guard in the league, with his biggest rival being Deron Williams. The New Orleans Hornets had arrived and Paul was surrounded by a good supporting cast consisting of a shot-blocking lob threat and a young Tyson Chandler, gritty hard-working big man David West, and shooters on the wing with Mo Peterson and Peja Stojakovic among others. However, for the next 3 years, we saw the team regress due to injuries, and after a slow start in the 2009-2010 season, the front office decided to let go of coach Byron Scott. This caused Paul to express his displeasure with the move and ultimately led to the Hornets missing the playoffs for the first time since Chris Paul's 2nd season. In 2010-2011, the Hornets were introduced to new permanent head coach Monty Williams, who often clashed with CP3. However, the team was back to their winning ways, finishing 46 and 36 on the year, cracking a 7th seed in a tough Western Conference. They matched up with the defending champion Kobe Bryant and the Los Angeles Lakers, but were eliminated in the first round in 6 games. Paul had some amazing individual stats during the playoffs. However, the team wasn't really up to par and couldn't be considered contenders moving forward. The franchise then started to fear that Paul could leave in free agency and then started to pursue trades so that he doesn't leave without a return. And then Chris Paul was traded to the Los Angeles Lakers. Or so we thought.
The league says no deal, and this thing appears to have caused quite a rift here now between large and small market teams.
The NBA itself actually owned the Hornets at the time of the trade, and Commissioner David Stern denied it because of, in his words, basketball reasons. Just a few days later, Chris Paul would still find himself in Los Angeles though, but this time as a member of the Los Angeles Clippers.
The Hornets will get all that. The Clippers get back Chris Paul, 2 future second-rounders, and by all indications, this trade will be formally approved by night's end.
Paul arriving on the Clippers rejuvenated the franchise immediately after being a laughingstock for decades. They developed a high-tempo, fast-paced style of play since they already had a rising superstar in Blake Griffin, who was paired in the front court with another high-flying big man in DeAndre Jordan. This new style of play earned them the nickname Lob City, and the Clippers couldn't go anywhere else but up. CP3's excellent play combined with his new teammates earned the team a 40 and 26 record in a shortened lockout season, but they will be bounced in the 2nd round to the San Antonio Spurs. By the 2014-2015 season, the Clippers are finally expected to take that next step and compete for a championship, but blew a 3-1 lead against the James Harden-led Houston Rockets in once again the 2nd round. This would become a recurring theme with the Clippers, in which they were expected to compete for a championship, but always fell short, and it usually happened due to Chris Paul suffering an injury or the team not having a solidified scoring wing next to him to help out on offense. Throughout the Lob City years, the team cycled through wing players such as Caron Butler, Matt Barnes, and even Paul Pierce, but they were all in the later stages of their careers.
Chasing that farewell tour, they don't love you like that.
and due to the contracts of CP3 Blake and DeAndre Jordan, they were never able to get that consistent perimeter player they so desperately needed. While successful, the Lob City era was pretty disappointing, and CP3 was now on his way, but this time to Houston.
This just in, Chris Paul is now a Houston Rocket.
The question is, how will Paul and another ball-dominant guard and MVP runner-up James Harden coexist?
In the summer of 2017, Chris Paul was traded to the Houston Rockets for a handful of players such as Pat Beverly, Montrezl Harrell, and Lou Williams. He was entering a new system led by James Harden, and many wondered if the pair would actually work together considering Harden was so ball dominant and Paul also needed the ball in his hands. After a poor debut and missing the next 14 games due to a knee injury, Paul was able to return and help James Harden and the Houston Rockets clinch the #1 seed in the West with a 65-17 team record. The Rockets, under head coach Mike D'Antoni, heavily relied on the three ball, even attempting 3,470 shots from long distance, with Paul himself averaging a career-high 6.5 threes a game. Paul was always known as a mid-range assassin who liked to move the ball, but despite the change, he showed that he can thrive in a different environment. In his first conference final appearance, CP3 and the Rockets went up against the juggernaut squad in the Golden State Warriors. Back-to-back MVP Steph Curry, one-time regular season and finals MVP Kevin Durant, sharpshooter Klay Thompson, and the soul of the team who shot the basketball as if he had a backpack on, Draymond Green, stood in their way. But the Rockets were able to take a 3-2 series lead and were well on their way to matching up against the Cleveland Cavs in the NBA Finals. But once again, Chris Paul went down with yet another injury.
You know, Reg, sometimes those can be some of the scariest injuries for us players when you go up and you hurt yourself and it was no contact.
Yep, that's right. Chris Paul suffered a hamstring injury during the final minute of Game 5, which caused him to miss the final 2 games of the series that allowed the Golden State Warriors to go on and win in 7. Not only did Paul miss the last 2 games, but the Rockets had a sizable lead during Game 7, but went on to miss 27 consecutive threes, and yes, I said consecutive threes, and ultimately lost the game 101-92. The Rockets, now feeling more confident than ever, signed Chris Paul to a 4-year, $160 million max contract in the 2018 offseason. The team, however, had some early season struggles, and CP3 himself even got into an altercation with Lakers point guard Rajon Rondo and was suspended for 2 games. Eventually, the team got on a roll and finished as the 4th seed in the conference with a 53-29 record, backed by improved play from the MVP runner-up James Harden. Fast forward to the 2019 playoffs though, and the Rockets once again found themselves matched up against the defending champion, Golden State Warriors, in the second round. The results, same as the year before. The Rockets were eliminated again in 6 games.
From turmoil in Los Angeles to turmoil in Houston, The Athletic is reporting that during Game 6, there was some tension between Chris Paul and James Harden about the way they were running the offense, and Paul wanted to see more ball movement.
Chris Paul at times has been regarded as a locker room cancer by some former teammates like Glenn Davis and Ryan Hollins, and tend to rub people the wrong way with his demanding personality. Let's rewind back to when he and James Harden had another altercation during a playoff game against the Utah Jazz in 2018. In the 2019 offseason, just a week after trading Paul George to the Los Angeles Clippers for young up-and-comer Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, the Oklahoma City Thunder then traded their explosive point guard Russell Westbrook to the Rockets for Chris Paul and some picks. Westbrook was now headed to play with James Harden, who made it to the finals together in 2012 with Kevin Durant during their early years in the league. Meanwhile, CP3 was headed back to OKC, where he started his NBA journey, and many believe he wouldn't be there for long, as the franchise was now in a rebuilding state and he was expected to be shipped off again. After not being able to find a suitable partner to facilitate a Chris Paul trade with, the Oklahoma City Thunder kept him on the roster, and his leadership helped with the development of second-year guard SGA. Coach Billy Donovan even implemented 3-guard lineups that included CP3, Gilgeous-Alexander, and Dennis Schroeder, and ran a slower pace than what Paul was used to on the Rockets. Though the team started off slow, CP3 was named an All-Star for the 10th time in his career, with averages of 18 points and 7 assists, and helped turn the season around, finishing with a 44-28 record and a 5-seed playoff berth in the Western Conference. OKC ran into the newly formed duo of Paul's former teammate just the season prior, James Harden, and Russell Westbrook in the first round, but they lost in 7 games. Despite the loss, the narrative around CP3 quickly went from a chemistry-killing irritant to one of the best basketball minds for younger players and a tremendous clutch performer, but everyone knew that Paul was in his mid-30s and it was time for him to compete for championships again.
Oklahoma City will always have a special place in my heart. Nothing like it, and as y'all know, go Thunder, Thunder up. Peace and respect.
Woj, what do you have?
The big one, Chris Paul is headed to the Phoenix Suns. He'll go on a multi-player deal from Oklahoma City. And now the Suns and Robert Sarver in the Western Conference, they become a real factor in this Western Conference race.
So while Chris Paul never got to play with Kobe, there was now the opportunity to run with his protege, Devin Booker, and the first pick in the 2018 draft, DeAndre Ayton. The Phoenix Suns went 8-0 in the bubble a year prior under coach Monty Williams, and many believe the only thing missing to make them an actual playoff contender was a star point guard to run the backcourt along D-Book. While the Suns had some other young players such as Mikal Bridges, Cameron Payne, and Cam Johnson, the front office also surrounded them with veterans like Jay Crowder and of course CP3. The team was deep and were expected to make the playoffs, but no one really thought of them as a championship squad. But once again, the leadership and experience of Chris Paul proved many doubters wrong. He was able to take some of the scoring load off of Devin Booker and was the perfect pick-and-roll ball handler for big man DeAndre Ayton. On February 20th, 2021, Paul passed Oscar Robertson on the all-time career assist list, and a few days later was selected for his 11th All-Star appearance. Alongside teammate Devin Booker, the two became the first Suns duo since Steve Nash and Amari Stoudemire in 2010. The Suns ended up finishing the season as the number 2 seed with a 51-21 record, making the playoffs for the first time since once again the Steve Nash days, but weren't expected to do much since their first round matchup were the defending champion, Los Angeles Lakers, led by LeBron James and big man Anthony Davis. The Suns took Game 1 after a solid performance from Ayton, and the series was tied at 2 apiece after Anthony Davis went down with a groin injury in Game 4. They were able to close out the Lakers in 6 games and swept the MVP Nikola Jokic and the Denver Nuggets in the second round. Paul had finally reached his second conference final against his former team, the Los Angeles Clippers, but had entered the league's safety protocol after testing positive for COVID-19 and missed the first 2 games. With the Clippers missing Kawhi Leonard due to a knee injury he suffered against the Utah Jazz the previous round, the series could have went in any direction, but the Suns took command and won in 6 games, led by an explosive 41 points from Chris Paul.
Man, I'm just so happy for all the people around me. You know what I mean? And to do it here in LA with the Clippers, this is my family too. I gave 6 hard years to the Clippers. We fought hard.
CP3 reached the NBA Finals for the first time in his career, and it was time to stamp a championship on his Hall of Fame-ready legacy. The only team left in his way was former 2-time MVP and Defensive Player of the Year Giannis Antetokounmpo and the Milwaukee Bucks. Many considered the Suns as the favorite to win the finals, as the Bucks had been pretty disappointing when it mattered most in recent years, and they proved that by jumping to a 2-0 series lead, winning both of their first 2 games at home.
We saw Milwaukee in the past come from two games down deficits and win. So I think they can do it again.
And that's exactly what happened. After being up 2-0 and taking control of the NBA Finals, Chris Paul and the Suns found themselves down 3-2 to the Bucks and lost Game 5 on their home court, even after back-to-back 40-point scoring outputs by Devin Booker. The series had taken a huge shift by this point, and Chris Paul went from being talked about as a top point guard of all time by the media to now them questioning if he will ever have a chance at a championship like this ever again. It was now time for Game 6 and another opportunity for Chris Paul to define his legacy and will his team to a Game 7 back on their home court in Phoenix. The Suns started off slow, being down by as many as 14 in the first quarter, but then bounced back in the second, even taking the lead at the half behind some amazing defense, only allowing Giannis to mostly score during that period. It was a back and forth affair for all of the third quarter, with the score tied at 77 and the Suns in a great position to send the series to a 7th game back home. Chris Paul had a team-high 26 on great efficiency, but the lack of experience surrounding the roster showed, and no one was able to stop Giannis in his historic 50-point performance in Game 6. Paul's chance of winning the 2021 NBA Finals has sadly come to an end.
He has hurt. His legacy was hurt. And this is what I mean. Chris Paul is a brilliant player, the perfect point guard, point god. But there have been many collapses in the playoffs in the past.
As proven all season, the Suns would not be where they finished without the addition of CP3, and he once again showed his leadership assisting a young team. The problem for Chris is that when it matters most, he and his team doesn't show up. He is now the first player to blow a 2-0 series lead 4 times in the playoffs, and while some say his legacy cannot be tarnished, playoff success is what defines the top-tier legends in NBA history. So while Chris Paul still has a few years left in the tank, the question that remains for him is, will he ever be able to get that ring that will ultimately decide where he ranks all time among the great point guards such as Magic, Steph Curry, and Isaiah Thomas? The story is still being written for Chris Paul, but the question we all want to know is, what's next?